Dear students, today we will have a lesson on Humayun. Now the question is, who was Humayun? Humayun was the son of Babur, the founder of the Mughal India. Here we will be highlighting the various facets of Humayun's life, about his early days, Humayun as the Mughal ruler, how Sher Shah defeated Humayun and Humayun had to flee to Persia, and then how he came back and recaptured the throne. His scholarly activities, his character, and lastly, though an insignificant character in the history of Mughal India, but still he needs special mention. If I start with the early days of Humayun's life, then I might say that when he got the throne, that time he was 23 years old and not that much matured to handle both the internal and the external affairs of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire was in its nutshell, because just after Babur, he got the throne. He was the governor of Badakhshan before becoming the Mughal ruler. He also took part in the battles of Panipat and Khanwa. He was very much well educated. He knew many languages. He had interest in astronomy, astrology, mathematics, and philosophy. When he became the ruler of Hindustan, his journey was not at all smooth. He got an administration from his father which was not well maintained, and his father had no plan to develop or to nourish the administrative infrastructure of Mughal India. Perhaps he had no time for it. The army which Humayun got from his father was not at all consolidated. In his army, he had the Indians, the Afghans, the Turks, and others. These people, they were not at all loyal to him. The rulers of Malwa and Gujarat were hostile to Humayun. His position in Bengal and Bihar was crucial. In 1531, Humayun he besieged the fort of Kalinjar in Bundelkhand, but he did not get any success from this mission, and it was a mistake on his part, according to some of the historians. In 1532, he fought against the Afghans under the leadership of Muhammad Shah, and he defeated them in the Battle of Daura, which took place in the year of 1532. After defeating the Afghans, Humayun besieged the fort of Chunar in 1532, and that time the fort was under Sher Shah. He did not conquer the fort, rather he received a purely perfunctory submission from Sher Shah. It was definitely a diplomatic mistake by Humayun, and it was a blunder on his part. In 1539, Sher Khan, who was a great warrior and very brave, he defeated Humayun in the Battle of Chausa. Again in 1540, Sher Shah defeated Humayun in the Battle of Kanauj. After this battle, Humayun had no other option excepting leaving the country. He went to Persia and he was in exile for 15 years from 1540 to 1555. Sher Shah that time became the ruler of Hindustan because there was no one who could control the affairs of the Mughal Empire, and it was a temporary end of the rule of the Mughal rulers in India. Sher Shah established his empire, which was known as the Sur Empire. Sher Khan or Sher Shah, who was also known as Sher Shah Suri, is a remarkable character in history of India. Now we will highlight the achievements of Sher Shah. It's justified to say Akbar, who was one of the greatest rulers of Mughal India, followed the footsteps of Sher Shah. Sher Shah Suri ruled only for 5 years, perhaps one of the great rulers of our country. How he dealt with the problems made him one of the best and perhaps the able administrator. He was very much impartial to his subjects, both the Hindus and the Muslims. In administration, what he tried to implement was later followed by the Mughal rulers as well as by the British in modern India. In administration, he implemented many reforms. He divided his empire into units. He recruited many officials from the Hindus also, and his officers were entrusted with several responsibilities. He decentralized his administration, and his administration was not at all a top-heavy administration. He was a path breaker in this regard because how he tried to experiment with the administrative devices was perhaps a new feature in the history of India. Even in ancient Indian history, apart from Ashoka, we didn't find anyone who had thought about decentralization. He was very much fond of justice. His qazis were very much efficient and followed his orders always. On the one hand, he decentralized his administration. He had many officials. On the other hand, the officials were bound to follow his instructions. By this way, he balanced his administration to a great extent. He was in favor of having an impartial outlook for all his subjects, as I have mentioned earlier. This kind of mentality was reflected in his revenue administration. Here also he championed the cause and set an example for others, especially for Akbar and later for the British rulers in our country. Sher Shah, for the first time, measured the land and fixed the land revenue forever. He divided the land according to its fertility and implemented this new system. By doing so, he regularized the land revenue system, and also his subjects were happy. He, to some extent, curtailed the power of the Hindu intermediaries, who were known as Khut, Muqaddam, Chaudhries, etc. Some historians wanted to blame Sher Shah by saying that he was communal as he suppressed the power of the Hindu intermediaries. But it was not a historic truth. Rather, it was the distortion of history. By curtailing their power, Sher Shah wanted to give some sort of comfort not only to his Muslim subjects, also to his Hindu subjects, because the nature of the economy was purely agrarian and the major occupation of his subjects was agriculture. Both the Hindus and the Muslims, they were engaged in farming. So it was not at all proper to say that Sher Shah had a communal attitude. Regarding communication, Sher Shah took some revolutionary steps. He constructed many roads. By this way, he made communication easier, which was definitely beneficial for the growth and development of trade and commerce. One of the roads built by Sher Shah is still very much important, which is GT Road or Grand Trunk Road. Sher Shah also tried to improve the postal system by using swift horses. He had spies, and his spies were very much efficient, who always used to give him news about any kind of rebellion or any kind of conspiracy which was going against him. So on the one hand, he had an efficient administration. On the other hand, he tried to improve the infrastructure related to land revenue. By this way, he proved that though he was not that much literate or educated like Humayun, but with his practical wisdom, he himself made an example set for others to follow. Humayun left India because he had no other option. He was defeated by Sher Shah, and Sher Shah established a new empire. Humayun had three brothers. They were Kamran, Askari, and Hindal. In the initial days of his rule in India, Humayun, being the Mughal king or emperor or Badshah, he gave some of the parts of his empire to his three brothers. But he was so unfortunate. When he was defeated by Sher Shah, he asked for help to Kamran, one of his brothers. But Kamran did not help Humayun. When Humayun was in Persia, with the help of the Persian troops, he conquered Kandahar. After conquering Kandahar, he gave it to the king of Persia. In 1544, he conquered Kabul. After consolidating his position in Persia, he was waiting for an opportunity to invade India or to recapture his throne. By due course of time, he got that opportunity also. Sher Shah, he died in 1545, and after his death, Islam Shah, he ruled for 10 years. When he died, his minor son became the ruler of Hindustan. He was killed by Islam's brother-in-law, Muhammad Adil Shah. Muhammad Adil Shah was overthrown by Ibrahim Sur. Ibrahim Sur was killed by Sikandar Sur. When Sikandar Sur became the ruler of the Sur dynasty. It was the last phase of that particular dynasty, and it was in a very crucial stage. By taking the advantage of the situation, Humayun returned from Persia and he recaptured the throne and re-established the Mughal Empire. In the last phase of his rule, because Humayun ruled India in two consecutive phases. In the first phase also, he did not get any opportunity, or even he failed to prove his efficiency and efficacy as an able ruler. In the second or the last phase also, he had many plans, but he failed to execute. In January 1556, he made a tragic accident and he had a fall from the staircases of the famous building called Din Panah. As a result of this accident, he died, and with his death, another significant chapter in the pages of Mughal Indian history ended. As I have mentioned earlier, though Humayun is always considered as an insignificant character in Indian history, but still he had some merits. He was a great academician, he was a great scholar, he had knowledge about many languages, he was expert in different branches of knowledge like philosophy, astronomy, astrology, and others. But the historians always give emphasis on his faults. So, first we will analyze that what were the faults or the mistakes of Humayun. Then, at the end of this lesson, we will reassess his character. One of the mistakes on Humayun's part is in the initial days of his rule as the emperor of Hindustan, he divided some of the portions of his empire to his brothers. His brothers were never friendly to him, rather, they were very much hostile. It was definitely a wrong decision on Humayun's part that made his position weaker, and Humayun had to pay for it. Secondly, in the first phase of his rule, he did nothing for the welfare of his subjects. He was busy in wars. As a result of this, his treasury became almost bankrupted. Thirdly, Humayun failed to have a proper estimation or judgment about Sher Khan or Sher Shah Suri. Humayun underestimated Sher Shah's caliber, but he was wrong, and by defeating Humayun, Sher Shah proved that though he was a small Jagirdar from Sasaram, but he was more efficient and more able than Humayun, who got the throne by the virtue of being Babur's son. Lastly, after the Battle of Chausa in 1539, Humayun never tried to recapture the territories from Kanauj to Banaras. It was a mistake. It was rather a very serious fault at his part If he would have done this, then the story would be different. On the one hand, he underestimated Sher Shah. On the other hand, he was not that much shrewd or smart enough to handle with the crisis situation. As a result of all this, he never got that kind of appreciation in the eyes of the historians. He was a learned man, had knowledge on various disciplines. He had interest in culture, in heritage. Unfortunately, he failed to prove himself as an able ruler like his son Akbar. He lacked sense for financial betterment, or in other words, how to improve the economy of his empire. He gave lots of donations and grants to his relatives. Sometimes he was also busy in making merry. He had an attraction for opium, which also went against his caliber being the perfect ruler for Hindustan. I would like to end my lecture, and also it will be like a justification of my hypothesis that, as I have already said, that in spite of having qualities of being a great ruler, how Humayun failed to achieve something in his life, something great in his life rather, and was always considered, and still he is considered as one of the insignificant characters of Mughal Indian history. As Erskine opined, I quote, "The real character of Humayun may be better gleaned from the events of his reign. The greater part of his reign presented a series of reverses, rebellions, and anarchy, the fruit of his lack of political firmness and determination."